I never believed silence could be so loud until I sat there in the back seat of that cab, staring at the woman beside me, realizing she was describing my husband. Not just vaguely, not just kind of. She was telling me, without knowing it, that the man waiting for her at that beautiful lakeside cabin was my husband, Gregory, and I still had 30 miles to go. Just that morning, I had woken up to sunlight streaming through the curtains, my heart light, my mind humming with anticipation. Gregory had gone up to our retreat in Lakewood on Wednesday, said he needed quiet to finish drafting the plans for his next interior design project. "I just need space," Ellie, he had told me over the phone, his voice tender. "You know how the noise clutters my process." I'd laughed and agreed like I always did. That's the kind of wife I was, supportive, understanding, never questioning. Friday was a half day at the office, and as I walked out early with my coworkers waving behind me, I made a decision that felt spontaneous and sweet. I'd surprise him. We hadn't had a real weekend together in weeks, and I missed him. The idea of cooking dinner together, watching the lake shimmer at sunset, maybe even opening that bottle of Bordeaux we'd been saving. It gave me a rush I hadn't felt in a while. I drove home humming, packed my favorite cardigan, a flowy sundress, and, because I felt a little bold, the lingerie he had given me last Valentine's, just in case this turned into a weekend of reconnection. And then my car wouldn't start. I tried once, twice. The engine clicked, sputtered, then gave up. I sat there for a moment, fists clenched on the steering wheel, trying not to scream. Of course, of all days, I could have waited for the mechanic. I could have rescheduled, but I was determined. I didn't want to waste any more time. So I called for a taxi. Pricey for the distance, sure, but worth it. Or so I thought. The driver was an older man named George. Warm smile, gentle manners, and a slow southern drawl that made everything sound calm. We'd barely gotten 10 miles out of Charleston when he stopped to pick someone else up, said it was a shared ride request. I didn't mind. The more the merrier, I thought. Then she stepped in. She was striking, not just in the way that turned heads, but in the way that said she knew she turned heads. Auburn hair twisted into a perfect low bun, delicate makeup, a scent that was expensive and deliberate. Her name was Samantha. She smiled at me as she slid into the back seat, and I returned it, instinctively brushing my hand over my ponytail, suddenly hyper-aware of the slight smudge in my eyeliner. The ride started quiet enough. George played soft music. Samantha scrolled through her phone. I watched the trees go by, breathing in that rare sense of peace that comes from escaping the city. We were maybe 20 minutes in when she broke the silence. "I'm meeting someone," she said, unprompted, her voice light. "It's been a few weeks since we've seen each other. He's special." I smiled politely, murmured something vague. She took it as a green light. "He's older, talented, an interior designer, actually," she said, chuckling softly. "He's got this incredible mind. Everything has to be just right for him to work. That's why he goes out to this cabin. Says the city stifles his creativity." My body stiffened. "It's our spot," she continued, a dreamy look in her eyes. "He's even showing me his new project this weekend. Said he has a surprise for me." My lips parted, but no sound came out. "I'm a little nervous," she admitted, then laughed. "It's silly, right? I mean, we've been seeing each other for 6 months. But I think this weekend something big might happen." My lungs started to feel tight. The edges of the world blurred a little. Then she said it, just a name, casually. "Gregory." And the world stopped. My husband's name falling from the mouth of a stranger, like it belonged to her. I turned toward the window, pretending to admire the view, but inside I was screaming. I hadn't said a word about who I was. She didn't know me. She didn't know she had just shattered something sacred. And I didn't stop her, because something inside me, something cold, sharp, and terrifyingly clear, needed to hear more. And I knew I would. Samantha didn't notice the shift in me. Or maybe she did, but mistook it for polite interest. Either way, She kept talking and I kept listening. Each word was like a thread unraveling the fabric of my marriage. "You know what I love about him," she said, twirling a strand of her hair. "He always remembers the little things. Like how I adore white roses. And he doesn't just grab any bunch, he picks out the ones with long stems, the kind that look elegant in tall glass vases. White roses. Gregory used to bring them home for me. Every single anniversary. He said they reminded him of my quiet strength, of the way I held things together. I always thought that was the most beautiful thing he'd ever said to me. Samantha reached up, touched the dainty silver earrings hanging from her lobes. "He gave me these last week," she said proudly. Said they brought out the gray in my eyes. I mean, who notices something like that? Gregory noticed. He'd said the same thing to me about different earrings. For a moment, I almost laughed. Almost. Because the absurdity of it all, this recycled poetry he was spoon-feeding both of us, was just so pathetic. But laughter never came. Only a bitter twist deep in my chest. I still said nothing. I think she took my silence as encouragement. Or maybe she just didn't care. "We met at a cafe," she continued, shifting in her seat. "He was sketching something, plans, I think, and I accidentally knocked over a sugar jar. Total mess. He helped me clean it up, and then, out of nowhere, offered to buy me a coffee to make up for it." She giggled. "Who does that anymore?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her I had heard that story before, down to the spilled sugar. Only back then, the woman he helped was me. My grip on the seat tightened. George, still driving, turned up the radio slightly. Some soft country song drifted through the car. It would have been peaceful under any other circumstance. "Gregory is different," she went on. "He doesn't talk like other guys. He actually listens. He tells me about his work, how spaces should breathe, how colors affect mood. And I get it, you know? It's not just a job for him. It's art." I could see the way her face lit up when she spoke. She was in love. Completely. Blindly. And suddenly I didn't hate her. How could I? She was holding on to the same illusion I once had. Only difference was, I was further down the line. "What does he do, exactly?" I asked, finally speaking. My voice sounded strange. Detached. "He's an interior designer," she answered. "But he says labels don't matter. He just creates." She laughed. "Apparently, the cabin is where he thinks best. Has a studio out there and everything." "Of course he does. We built it together. I picked out the beams. I helped stain the floor. But I just nodded." "He told me he's married," she said suddenly, her tone shifting ever so slightly. "But it's complicated. He says she's difficult, controlling, always criticizing him. He said he's staying for now because she's emotionally fragile." Emotionally fragile. I had held him through panic attacks. I had stayed up nights to make sure he got through deadline weeks. I had given him space when he asked and attention when he needed it. I wasn't fragile. I was exhausted. There's a difference. I turned back to the window. The sky was beginning to darken. Storm clouds gathering. "He's planning to leave her," Samantha added, almost as if she needed me to approve. "He just wants to do it in a way that won't break her." Break me? I was already broken. Only I hadn't realized it until now. She started talking about their plans, dinners at a restaurant in the city, the one with the fountain view. That had been our place. I spent my last birthday there. I still had the candle from the cake. He had brought her there too. I couldn't breathe. My stomach turned. My mouth tasted like metal. And still I said nothing, because something in me had already shifted. Something calm, calculating, steady. I wasn't going to cry in a taxi. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't even going to tell her who I was. Not yet, because I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to watch the ending. I don't remember exactly when it stopped feeling like a car ride and started feeling like a slow-motion disaster. Somewhere between the moment she said his name and the moment she started talking about the scar on his arm, I lost track of time. He has this scar, Samantha said, smiling softly. Right here. She traced her right forearm with one perfectly manicured finger. From a bike accident when he was a kid. He said he flew over the handlebars and landed on gravel. Had to get stitches. Can you imagine? I could. I had. I'd kissed that scar more times than I could count. Gregory had told me the same story. How he'd refused to cry. How he'd gotten ice cream on the way home. How that scar reminded him to be careful with what he loved. We used to joke that it made him look rugged. I used to touch it absent-mindedly when we sat on the couch watching TV. And now it belonged to someone else's version of him. I stayed silent because I didn't trust my voice not to tremble. Samantha kept going. He says he wants to show me where he grew up, that it shaped how he sees the world. Isn't that romantic? She asked, not waiting for an answer. Oh, and next month, we're thinking of taking a trip together. Prague, maybe. He said the architecture there inspires him. Prague. Last winter, Gregory had told me he might be sent to Europe for a design expo. He said it'd be boring and business-focused, and that I shouldn't bother coming. I remember offering to take vacation time to go with him. He'd kissed my forehead and said you'd hate it. So he hadn't gone alone. And all this time, I thought we were just drifting because of work. Because we were tired. Because we were aging. No, it was because I had become invisible. Outside, the trees blurred by gray-green smudges. Rain tapped the windows gently. A storm was definitely coming. He told me, Samantha said casually, that his wife can't have kids, which is probably for the best. He says it's a sad situation, but she's kind of unstable, like emotional all the time. Honestly, I think he feels guilty. That's why he's stuck. Unstable. Gregory and I had been trying to conceive for 2 years. It had been exhausting and emotional. And yes, I'd cried. A lot. After every failed test, every doctor's visit, every round of hopeful vitamins. But I was never unstable. I was hopeful. And now I knew he'd turned that vulnerability into a weapon. Used it as his excuse. Painted me as a villain in someone else's fairy tale. Samantha touched her lips with a tissue, freshening her lipstick. Bright red. The color of confidence, of seduction. We're celebrating our 6-month anniversary this weekend, she said brightly. He said he's got something planned. Maybe even a ring. He asked for my ring size last week. My heart slammed against my ribs. Gregory had asked for my ring size too last month. Said he wanted to get me something special for our upcoming anniversary. I thought maybe he was trying. Maybe we were turning a corner. I thought wrong. And then she said something that made the breath freeze in my throat. He said he's never felt so free with anyone, that he's finally able to breathe, that I make him feel like a man again. My eyes stung. I blinked rapidly, refusing to let the tears fall. Breathe. That was our word. He used to say it every time I got overwhelmed. Just breathe, Ellie. He'd whisper it against my temple, his hands resting gently on my shoulders. Now he whispered it to her. I didn't even realize the cab had slowed until George leaned over the seat and muttered, "Sorry, folks. Looks like we've got a pile up ahead. Might be a bit of a wait." Fine by me, because I needed the time. I needed to collect every shard of what I'd just heard, stack them neatly and build something out of them. Not revenge. Not rage. Clarity. I sat back, closed my eyes, and listened to the rhythmic drumming of the rain on the roof. Samantha was still chatting, oblivious, excited, glowing. She had no idea. Not yet. But soon. She would. The storm was in full swing by the time we reached the turnoff toward Lakewood. The sky hung low and bruised, rain lashing sideways against the windshield. George squinted into the blur, wipers thumping steadily. I sat still, heart pounding louder than the thunder overhead. Samantha, meanwhile, was fixing her hair in a compact mirror. She looked radiant, blissfully unaware. She reapplied her lipstick, smoothed her dress, and then gave a little squeal. "There he is," she said, pointing through the window. "He said he'd be waiting by the gate." I followed her gaze, and there he was, Gregory, wearing the blue flannel shirt I'd given him last Christmas. The one, I said, brought out the green in his eyes. He was standing in front of our gate, the exact gate I had painted myself 2 summers ago. And he was smiling, the smile I once believed was reserved for me. I shrank into my seat, praying the fogged glass would shield me. George pulled over, slowing to a stop near the curb. "This is me," Samantha chirped. She turned to me with a bright smile. "Thanks for the company. Have a lovely weekend." My lips barely moved. "You too." She opened the door, stepped out, and Gregory walked toward her like a man stepping into a dream. I watched, frozen, as he wrapped his arms around her, pulled her in close, and kissed her, deeply, intimately. I looked away, but the sound, his voice, still reached me through the rain. "I missed you, sweetheart." Sweetheart. He used to call me that. Something broke then. Not loudly, not with fire, quietly, like a candle snuffed out without warning. George looked back over his shoulder. "Where to next, ma'am?" My mouth opened, but no words came. I could leave, right now. I could let that be the last image I ever had of Gregory Whitaker, my husband, holding another woman in the rain, on the porch of the home we built together. But then I heard it again. Samantha's laugh. Bright, confident, victorious. Something inside me shifted. "Take me back to the city," I said quietly. "My plans changed." George blinked. "You sure? Bit of a drive in this weather." "Yes," I nodded. "Please." As the car pulled away, I stared out the window. But the road blurred, not from the rain, but from something burning behind my eyes. I lasted all of 3 miles. "Stop the car," I said suddenly. George glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Everything all right?" "No," I said, "but I'm going back anyway." He made a U-turn on the narrow road without question. No comments, no judgment, just the hum of the engine and the soft patter of rain. When we reached the house again, the gate was slightly ajar. I paid George double, told him he wouldn't need to wait. He gave me a knowing look and nodded before driving off. There I stood, on the gravel drive in the soft drizzle, staring at the house I once called ours. I could hear laughter from inside. Gregory's voice, then Samantha's. They sounded comfortable, familiar, like they belonged there. I walked up to the front door and paused. My hand hovered above the knob. I could storm in, throw accusations, demand explanations, but I didn't want a scene. I wanted clarity. So I smoothed my hair, straightened my coat, and rang the doorbell. Footsteps, then the sound of the latch turning. Gregory opened the door, and his face turned the color of ash. "Eleanor," he whispered. "W.H., what are you doing here?" I smiled. Surprise. Got off work early. Thought I'd come spend the weekend with my husband. He blinked. Panic bloomed in his eyes. You never said." "No," I cut in gently. "I didn't." A voice came from behind him. "Who is it?" Samantha stepped into view, brushing a loose curl behind her ear. Her expression froze the moment she saw me. She looked from me to Gregory, then back again. I extended a hand toward her, calm and composed. "Hi, I'm Eleanor, Gregory's wife." She didn't take my hand. She didn't have to, because in that moment, everything fell into place. The earrings, the roses, the stories, the lies. The truth stood between us, thick as smoke. Gregory's mouth opened, but no words came. And I stepped inside anyway, because it was still my house. And I wasn't done yet. Not even close. The house smelled like rosemary and bergamot, the scent of the candle I'd left on the windowsill last time I was here. The scent I thought of as home. Except now it didn't feel like mine. Gregory stood frozen in the doorway, as if unsure whether to step aside or slam the door in my face. I walked past him anyway, hanging my coat on the same wooden hook I'd installed by the door 3 years ago. Samantha trailed behind me, silent, her heels tapping lightly against the hardwood floor. The living room was exactly as I'd left it. The same blue throw folded on the couch. The coffee table I refinished myself. 2 cups of tea sat steaming on it, and a small plate of lemon cookies, my favorite recipe. My stomach turned. "So cozy," I said softly, running my fingers along the mantel. "Looks like you've made yourselves at home." No one replied. I turned and smiled. Well, I suppose it would be rude of me not to offer my guests something to drink. Gregory opened his mouth, closed it again. Samantha stared at me as if I were a ghost. "Sit," I said gently, gesturing to the couch. "Please, it's raining." No sense in sending anyone back out right away. They obeyed. I walked into the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd once spent an entire weekend painting the cabinets pale sage. My hands moved on their own, muscle memory taking over, finding the good mugs, slicing the cheese, arranging the charcuterie. All the things I used to do when Gregory had clients over. But this time the performance had a different audience. When I returned, I placed everything on the table with quiet grace. Gregory sat stiff as stone. Samantha's lipstick had faded slightly. Her hands trembled as she reached for her tea. "So," I said, taking my seat across from them, "how did you two meet?" Samantha blinked. Cafe," Gregory muttered, not looking at me. I nodded. "The sugar jar story. Classic." He flinched. Samantha set her cup down too quickly. Tea sloshed over the edge. She didn't notice. I folded my hands neatly in my lap. "Do you love him?" I asked. Samantha's eyes widened. I thought I did." "Do you still?" She looked at Gregory, then back at me. "I don't know." Silence stretched. "Eleanor," Gregory began, but I cut him off with a raised hand. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I'm not here to scream or beg or ask why. I already know the why. Because you're weak, Gregory. Because you're selfish. Because you wanted something new instead of fixing what you already had." His face flushed crimson. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. Smart man for once. I turned to Samantha. "You know, he said the exact same things to me?" I said softly, that he'd never felt more free, that he could breathe around me, that I made him feel like a man. Her lips parted. She didn't speak. I believed him too. We sat there like that. 3 people, 1 lie, too many truths, until finally I rose to my feet and walked to the fireplace. From the mantel, I picked up the silver picture frame. Our wedding photo. Me in ivory lace, him in a navy suit. Both of us laughing. I turned it around and set it face down. "I think we're done here," I said. Samantha stood slowly, her eyes downcast. "I didn't know." "I swear." "I believe you." She swallowed. "I should go." "No," I said, surprising even myself. "You'll stay the night. It's late, the roads are slick, and I wouldn't send a stranger out into this storm, even one who kissed my husband." Samantha looked like she might cry. Gregory looked like he already had. "Guest rooms upstairs, last door on the right. There's fresh towels in the closet." She nodded, murmured a thank you, and disappeared up the stairs. Gregory turned to me, shoulders sagging. "Ellie, I held up my hand again. "No more. You've said enough." I picked up my cup, took a long sip, and let the silence do the talking. Because in this house, in this moment, I was the one in control. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. Not even because I was sad. I lay awake in the guest bedroom, my bedroom, listening to the creaks of the house I had once cherished. The occasional groan of old wood in the wind. The whisper of rain still sliding down the windows. And above it all, silence from the room down the hall. I imagined Samantha curled beneath the covers in what used to be the kids' room. We had painted it soft yellow years ago when we thought we'd fill it with cribs and lullabies. Now it sheltered the woman who almost stole my life away, though really she didn't even know it. Sometime before dawn, I got up. The house was still. I padded barefoot into the kitchen, started a pot of coffee, and stared at the window while the machine hissed and gurgled. Outside, the sky was turning from black to charcoal, the first hints of morning softening the dark edges of the woods. Footsteps on the stairs made me turn. Samantha stood there, pale, hair loose, her mascara faintly smudged. She looked like someone who had aged a year overnight. "Can I sit?" she asked, voice hoarse. I nodded. She eased into a chair at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the rim of an empty mug. "I didn't sleep," she said. "Me neither." Silence hung between us. Not hostile, not awkward, just heavy, like wet wool draped over both our shoulders. "How long did you know?" she asked. "Since the taxi." She blinked. "All that time, and you didn't say anything?" I poured coffee into 2 mugs and slid one across to her. I needed to see it for myself. She stared at the swirling liquid. "Why didn't you scream? Throw me out." I sat down. "Because I'm tired of screaming. And you didn't betray me, Samantha." "He did." She looked at me, eyes glassy. "I didn't know. He said you were cruel, controlling, that you'd ruin his life if he left." I gave a dry laugh. "Of course he did. That's what cowards do. They turn the truth into a prison and hand the key to someone else." "I feel stupid." "You're not." But I believed him. So did I. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug and stared at her reflection in the coffee. "I thought I was saving someone. Turns out I was just another version of the problem he didn't want to solve." The kettle whistled from the stovetop. I ignored it. "You know what the worst part is?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He never told me about you. Not really. No photos. No stories. Just hints. Like I was supposed to imagine you as the villain." I stood and opened the cupboard above her, pulled out a photo album, set it on the table. "Here," I said. "This is the woman he was married to for 5 years." She flipped it open hesitantly. Page after page of memories. Christmases, vacations, the cabin under construction, smiling faces, entangled fingers, the illusion of forever. She paused on a picture of Gregory, kissing my cheek on our anniversary. I remembered that day because I had been sick, but still made him dinner. He told me it was the best meal he'd ever had. She turned the page and stopped. "That's the restaurant," she whispered. "The one with the fountain." "Our place," I said quietly. Tears filled her eyes. She closed the book slowly. "I'm sorry." "I know." A pause. "What will you do now?" "I'll drive you home." She looked surprised. "You don't have to." "I want to." I went upstairs, changed into jeans and a sweater, and grabbed the car keys from the bowl near the door. Gregory was still asleep when we left, or pretending to be. I didn't care. We drove in silence for the first few miles. Samantha stared out the window, her hands folded tightly in her lap. When we reached the highway, she finally spoke. "Thank you for not hating me." "I don't hate you." "Still, you didn't have to be kind." I glanced at her, then back at the road. We were both lied to. That makes us the same kind of woman, just at different stages. She nodded. We didn't say much after that, but something unspoken passed between us in the quiet. Not forgiveness exactly. Something better. Recognition. After I dropped Samantha off, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove around the city aimlessly for nearly an hour, through neighborhoods I hadn't visited in years, past coffee shops where Gregory and I used to sit on Sunday mornings, past the hospital where we once hoped for answers about why we hadn't gotten pregnant. The streets looked the same, but I didn't. I wasn't the woman who had left for the lake cabin the day before. That woman was gone. When I finally walked through the door of our condo, everything felt quieter than usual, but not in a sad way. More like the calm after a storm that had torn through and cleared out everything false, everything heavy, everything that no longer belonged. Gregory came home that evening. He didn't speak at first, just stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat, his eyes wide when he saw the suitcase sitting neatly by the bedroom door. "Ellie," he said, his voice cautious, "can we talk?" I didn't look up from the mug I was rinsing. "There's nothing left to say." "I was stupid," he started. I lost myself." "You didn't lose yourself," I said quietly. "You just chose a version of yourself that didn't include me. I never stopped loving you." I turned off the faucet. "Don't lie. You might have loved the idea of me, the loyalty, the comfort, but you haven't loved me, not the real me, for a long time." He stepped closer. "We can fix this." I shook my head. "No. You broke something that doesn't go back together." He looked around, as if trying to find something familiar to hold on to. "This place, the cabin, everything we built, stays with me," I interrupted. "I bought the condo before we married. The cabin deed is in my name. You can take the car." He blinked. "You've already decided." "I filed this morning," I said. "Mutual consent. If you don't fight it, we'll be done in 2 months." He sat down, suddenly looking old. Tired. Small. I didn't hate him, but I didn't feel sorry for him either. Gregory was never evil. He was just weak. And I had spent too long loving a man who needed admiration more than honesty. By the end of the week, he was gone. I packed the rest of his things with care. No yelling. No slamming doors. Just quiet decisions. I changed the sheets. Repainted the bathroom. Got a new plant for the windowsill. And then I went back to the cabin. Alone. I stood in the middle of that beautiful house I had helped design. Every piece of furniture, every photo, every book on the shelf, and realized I didn't have to burn it all down to reclaim it. I just had to start over. So I did. I hired a contractor to knock down the wall between the kitchen and the living room. Made the space open, bright. I turned the guest room into an art studio. I didn't know if I was any good at painting, but it didn't matter. For the first time, I was creating something just for me. 3 months passed. One crisp autumn afternoon, I was sitting in a little cafe near the waterfront, sketchbook open, lost in thought, when a familiar voice called my name. I looked up. It was Samantha. She looked different, lighter, confident. Her hair was shorter. She wore less makeup. And next to her sat a man, early 30s, scruffy beard, kind eyes, who looked at her like she was the center of the universe. "Eleanor," she smiled. "I hoped I might see you again." We hugged like old friends. She introduced her boyfriend, Ben, and I introduced myself simply as Ellie. Samantha didn't bring up Gregory. She didn't need to, but as they were about to leave, she turned back and said, "Thank you for everything." I nodded. "You deserve someone who doesn't need to lie to feel loved." She smiled. "So do you." Later that evening, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. "Eleanor? It's Henry. Gregory's old friend. We met once at that holiday party." I remembered. He'd always been kind. Funny. The kind of man who made you feel like you mattered when he spoke to you. "I heard about everything," he said. "I'm sorry. He messed up." He did. A pause. "I was wondering, would you have dinner with me sometime? Just 2 old acquaintances getting reacquainted." I laughed softly. "That depends. Are you the kind of man who tells the truth?" "Always," he said. "Even when it's hard." "Then yes." After I hung up, I stood by the window of my condo, my space, my light, my silence, and watched the sky fade from pink to gray. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free, not because I had ruined Gregory, but because I had chosen myself. I had let go of the illusion of who we were supposed to be and embraced the reality of who I was becoming. And that, I realized, was the greatest revenge of all. Living well, on my terms, in my own story,